Hi, welcome back. Sue here. This week we are talking about resilience. There's a wealth of research to suggest that children who are resilient do better academically as well as socially and emotionally. So, this week we're going to be talking about how we get kids to see the point of developing resilience and what kind of activities we might do at home to help them to do just that. To start with, I'm going to invite you to try and solve a problem for me. I'd like you to think about what these two things might have in common in relation to resilience. We've got a can of WD-40 and a light bulb. Okay, do you want the answer? So WD-40 is so called because it was the 40th version of the solution that was the one that actually worked. WD stands for water displacement. So 39 different versions of that formula failed, but the 40th was the one that worked, hence WD-40. The light bulb, it's been suggested that it took Thomas Edison about 1,000 attempts to get the light bulb to light. And a particularly mean journalist asked Edison how it felt to fail 999 times on the road to that success. And Edison looked the guy in the eye and said, actually, they weren't failures. They were 999 steps to the correct solution. And I needed each one of those steps to be able to work out how to get closer to that light bulb lighting. And there's something really valuable in that story to do with how we brand failure, if you like, for our children. I like to see a fail as a first attempt in learning. When our children understand that failure is a normal part of a problem-solving process, it makes it a less scary thing to encounter. And actually, one of the things that's very, very important when we're talking about how we help children to develop resilience is the language that we use around the learning process. Failure is actually our friend, because when we make a mistake and we step back and we work out why that didn't work, and we take a different approach, we adapt our approach, then what we are showing is a really great example of resilience in learning. And that's exactly what children need to be able to do to be academically successful. We need to get across to kids the message that smart people aren't born really, really clever. Actually, smart people can develop their abilities, they can develop their intelligence through adaptation and through sticking with tricky problems, looking at them from different angles, trying different solutions until they find the one that works. So more of that shortly, but let's start by thinking about how we really sell the point of resilience to our kids. So Will and I have looked at J.K. Rowling this week. We've been talking about her because she's somebody that Will really looks up to. He loves the Harry Potter characters and the Harry Potter books. And we found out this week that it took about 7 years from the very first idea for Harry Potter until the Philosopher's Stone was published. And actually, what Will found really interesting about that was that it was a really complicated problem and there wasn't any obvious solution because these books had never been written before. The characters were all new, the stories were all different, and J.K. Rowling had to work really, really hard on a complicated problem with no blueprint until she could find a solution that she was happy with. Now, if you're looking for really good resources on people who might be good role models for our children, there's a super website called amazingpeopleschools.com. And they've got a whole set of resources that are currently free to parents during lockdown on all kinds of different characteristics, and resilience is one of them. We've been looking at an artist called Frida Kahlo this morning, who is a brilliant example of resilience. She went through really difficult personal tragedy and overcame some horrendous physical injuries actually after an accident to become a really very famous and very successful renowned artist in her own right. So that's a really good website. I'd recommend having a look at that. There's all kinds of lesson plans on there. There's brilliant discussion starters. So if you're thinking about how do I fill these lockdown days with my child, have a look at amazingpeopleschools.com for different resources around resilience and all kinds of characteristics of people that the kids might be interested in. So in terms of other activities that we're doing this week that help Will to develop his resilience, I'm looking at things that take time. at problems that can't be solved immediately. So we might, for example, find a really big jigsaw that's really quite a complicated one. And on the first day, we might just do the outline of the jigsaw and then call it a day. The next day, we might look at doing the top left corner or the top right corner and so on. But what I'm trying to get across here is to show to Will that actually big, complicated problems aren't immediately solvable. We have to break those problems down into parts and have a go at each part at a time. And sometimes we'll be really successful, and other times we'll get stuck, it will go wrong, we'll get the pieces in the wrong order, and it'll be really annoying and frustrating. And then we'll come back and have another go. And actually, that process is really, really useful, whether it's a jigsaw, whether it's learning phonics, whether it's simultaneous equations, it doesn't matter what it is. This business that difficult problems are not immediately easy to solve. By their very definition, they take time. And we need to go through a process of trial and error until we get things right, until we get the solutions that we want. Now, as parents, we need to model that ourselves. And I have to put my hand up and admit that this is something that I find quite tricky. I am not somebody who is naturally patient. So if I can't solve something immediately, I do have a tendency to throw my hands in the air and say, oh, I can't be bothered. It's too hard. I can't do it. Now, I need to do a job on myself because our kids don't do what they say. Or rather, they don't do what we say. They do what we do. And if Will just throws his hands up in the air and says, oh, it's too hard, I can't do it, then I'm not really creating a very good model there from my behaviour for him to watch. What we need to be doing is saying, gosh, this is really frustrating. It is a really tricky problem. I can't do it yet. I'm going to take a break, but I'm going to come back and have another go. And if we can show our kids that that's what we do, they're more likely to do that as well. This is what is known as growth mindset. A lady called Carol Dweck, who was the professor of psychology at Stanford University, coined the phrase. And it's really, really useful when we're thinking about how we parent our children, how we develop their resilience, to talk about how we face problems, we accept that they're hard, and in a sense, we kind of seize the trickiness of it and say, okay, this is hard. I can't do it yet, but I'm going to stick with it until I really can do it. And when we see that approach in our children, that is the moment to jump in with the praise. Not at the end, not when they've got the problem right and the perfect solution. We've got to be careful about praising then, because although it's tempting to praise that they've got it right, if we only praise when they're getting it right, there's a risk that they won't want to get things wrong. Now, if kids are scared of getting things wrong, there's a good chance that they might start to step back from attempting the problem in the first place, and that's the last thing we want. So even though it's tempting to just praise them when they get it right, make sure we praise all the way through the process. When they're really sticking with a hard problem, when they're really trying, even if they've got frustrated, at the moment they come back and have another go, that's when we jump in with the praise, because what we are seeing there is a resilient character developing right in front of us, and that's what we want to praise. It's the resilience. It's not the correct answer. Okay, so I've got some homework to do this week in terms of my own resilience and my own patience with problems. I will be talking next week about growth mindset in a bit more detail, and we'll be linking that to the idea that intelligence is not fixed and that we can use something called neuroplasticity to help us become better at solving hard problems. But for now, do hang in there. We're nearly there. I know in theory the kids might be going back to school early June. We'll see how that shapes up. But we've got a few more weeks between now and then to try and do some problem solving, to encourage our children to be resilient, and for us to try and stay resilient too during lockdown. Take care and see you soon.